The Arizona desert doesn't negotiate terms of surrender. Captain Marcus Iron Wolf Kane understood this as he pressed his back against red sandstone, tasting blood and accepting mathematics. 42 years old, 24 years military service, 3 combat deployments that should have killed him. And here he was, dying because a diamondback rattlesnake had spooked his horse. 6 days tracking the Valdez brothers through country that looked like God's rough draft had ended with his Winchester 30 yards away, chambers empty, and his water gone since dawn. The bounty on Miguel Valdez, $50,000 for the man who'd murdered 3 federal marshals, wouldn't matter if Marcus became another skeleton, bleaching in the sun. He closed his eyes, thinking about his sister's last letter. You can't run from ghosts forever, Marcus. Someday you'll have to stop and fight them. When he opened them, she was there. The woman stood 8 feet away, studying him with the clinical precision of a sniper acquiring targets. Tall, maybe 5'9", with braided black hair and shoulders that spoke of years carrying weight that would break lesser people. Scars decorated her forearms like military ribbons, and her dark eyes held the 1,000-yard stare Marcus recognized from every mirror in every war zone he'd survived. She wasn't offering water. She was evaluating merchandise. Captain Kane. Her voice carried authority that didn't require volume. Marcus blinked through dehydration-induced confusion. Do we know each other? I know your service record. Afghanistan, 2010 through 2014. 2nd Ranger Battalion, 43 confirmed kills. Silver Star for Helmand Province. Purple Heart for Kandahar. She moved closer, boots silent on stone. I also know you've been hunting war criminals for private clients since your discharge. The woman crouched, maintaining tactical distance, and Marcus noticed the knife on her belt. Military issue, well maintained. This wasn't some desert wanderer. This was a professional. Captain Ayanna Begay, Army Intelligence, served 2 tours in your neighborhood. She gestured toward the empty horizon. Currently, Tribal Security Chief for the Dinetta Reservation. Small world. Getting smaller every day. Ayanna's expression remained unreadable. Especially for people like us. Marcus tried to sit straighter, failed, and accepted the humiliation. What do you want, Captain? I want to offer you a contract. I'm a little busy dying here. That's fixable. Your death. I mean, she pointed toward the endless wasteland surrounding them. I can save your life, Captain. Question is whether you're worth saving. Something in her tone made Marcus forget about his cracked ribs. Explain the terms. Ayanna stood, her shadow falling across him like a verdict. My people are facing extinction, not from bullets or bombs, from biology. She held up 5 fingers, then closed 2. 68 people 3 years ago, 19 today, 7 children born during that time. Her voice went cold. All dead before their 4th birthday. Marcus understood genetics enough to recognize the pattern. Isolated populations, limited gene pools, inbreeding depression leading to infant mortality and genetic disorders. You need outside DNA. I need warriors. Ayanna's jaw tightened. Men who understand duty. Men who won't abandon their posts when the mission gets difficult. She looked directly at him. Men who fight until they can't fight anymore, then keep fighting anyway. The desert wind shifted, carrying the scent of sage and possibilities that Marcus hadn't considered since leaving the service. You're asking me to father children. I'm asking you to prevent the extinction of a people who've survived Spanish cavalry, American expansion, and government boarding schools designed to kill our culture. Ayanna's voice carried the weight of 8 centuries. I'm asking you to help save the last generation of warriors this land has ever produced. Marcus studied her face, looking for deception or desperation. He found neither. Only the cold calculation of someone who'd made harder decisions than most people could imagine. How many women? 4, including myself. No hesitation, no embarrassment. Military contract captain, not marriage, not romance. Genetic diversity operations with clear objectives and defined success metrics. A hawk circled overhead, riding thermals with effortless grace. Marcus watched it and thought about choices that couldn't be undone. What if I refuse? Then you die here. I find someone else. What if I accept and change my mind later? Ayana's smile held no warmth. Then you die somewhere else. After we're finished with you. The honesty was brutal and refreshing. Marcus had signed contracts that sent him to kill strangers in foreign countries. None had ever asked him to become a father to save an entire people. Who else knows about this offer? My tribal council and Staff Sergeant Coda War Eagle. Her expression tightened almost imperceptibly. He was supposed to be selected. He's been waiting 2 years for me to choose him. But you didn't. 2 miscarriages, both at 7 months. Medical evaluation indicates genetic incompatibility. She looked away for the first time. Coda believes I'm too selective, too proud to accept what we have. What do you believe? I believe dead children don't continue bloodlines. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the sun burning through his skin. When he opened them, Ayana was standing over him, like judgment personified. You have 48 hours to decide, Captain. My medics will keep you alive that long. After that, she shrugged, the desert finishes what it started. 2 younger men emerged from concealment, moving with the fluid silence of apex predators. They lifted Marcus without ceremony, carrying him toward vehicles he hadn't heard approaching. As consciousness faded, Marcus caught one last glimpse of Ayana Begay. She stood silhouetted against the burning horizon, a warrior queen calculating the future of her people against the life of one broken soldier. And for the first time since leaving Afghanistan, Marcus wondered if survival might be more complicated than simply refusing to die. Marcus woke to the sound of children laughing. The ceiling above him was canvas and wooden poles, a traditional shelter that felt both ancient and temporary. His ribs had been wrapped with professional competence. An IV drip fed fluids into his arm, and someone had cleaned his wounds with supplies that smelled like military surplus. Through the entrance, he could see the reservation spread out in organized efficiency. Solar panels caught morning light, gardens grew in geometric precision, and children played under the watchful supervision of adults who moved like they'd seen enough violence to appreciate peace. But it was the women he noticed most. Stood near a medical station, her movements carrying the precise economy of someone who'd learned trauma surgery in places where mistakes meant death. Maybe 30, with intelligent eyes and surgeons' hands that had clearly saved more lives than they'd taken. Worked with a group of teenagers, teaching them something that involved weapons maintenance and tactical movement. Early 30s with the compact build of someone who'd learned violence as a survival skill, not a career choice. Supervised children's activities while simultaneously monitoring radio communications with the practiced multitasking of someone accustomed to command responsibility. Late 20s with the bearing of natural leadership and eyes that missed nothing. And watching them all, coordinating their activities with subtle hand signals and position adjustments, was Ayana Begay. She noticed Marcus observing and approached the shelter entrance. How do you feel, Captain? Like I got kicked by a horse and dragged through a minefield. Marcus tested his ribs, winced, and accepted the limitations. Your people know their business. Elena served 3 tours as a combat medic. Sarah was MP in Iraq. Maria ran logistics for a forward operating base in Afghanistan. Ayana stepped into the shelter. They're not just the mothers of our future, Captain. They're warriors who've proven themselves under fire. Marcus studied Ayana's face, looking for signs of what this admission cost her. He found only the cold professionalism of someone discussing operational requirements. Tell me about Coda. What do you want to know? Will he try to kill me? Yes, Probably today, no hesitation. It's tradition. Any outsider who wants to join the tribe has to prove himself against our best warrior. And if he kills me, then I made a mistake in my evaluation. Ayana's expression didn't change. And I start over with someone else. What if I kill him? Then you lose the best tracker and fighter my people have produced in 2 generations. She tossed him a bundle of traditional clothing. But you won't kill him. You seem confident. I read your psychological profile, Captain, all of it, including the classified sections. Her smile held no warmth. You're not a killer by nature. You're a protector who learned to kill when protection required it. There's a difference. She left him alone with clothes that felt like wearing someone else's history and questions that didn't have comfortable answers. The confrontation came at sunset. Marcus stood at the eastern edge of camp, wearing deerskin and uncertainty, watching the day die in colors that would have made artists weep. Coda War Eagle emerged from the gathering darkness like violence given human form. He was younger than Marcus had expected, maybe 29, built like a middleweight fighter who learned his skills in places where second place meant death. Scars decorated his knuckles, a burn mark crawled up his left forearm, and his eyes held the particular intensity of someone who'd seen too much too young. You're the replacement, Coda said in English that carried only the faintest accent. I'm the candidate. Same thing. Coda moved closer, and Marcus recognized the predatory circling he'd seen in warriors from a dozen different conflicts. You know what she's asking you to do. I know what she's offering. She's offering you my life, my place, my children. Coda's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. My future. Marcus met his stare without flinching. Then maybe you should have been good enough to keep them. The first punch came fast and hard, aimed at Marcus's solar plexus with enough force to drop a smaller man. Marcus slipped left, caught Coda's wrist, and used the younger man's momentum to send him stumbling sideways. Feel better? Marcus asked. Coda spun, hands raised, eyes bright with something that looked like anticipation. Not yet. They circled each other while the camp gathered to watch judgment rendered in the universal language of violence. No one moved to stop them. No one offered encouragement or warnings. This was a valuation being conducted in terms everyone understood. Coda feinted left, drove right, and discovered that Marcus hadn't spent 2 decades in the military without acquiring certain skills. The elbow that caught him in the floating ribs sent him gasping to one knee. Stay down, Marcus suggested. Coda came up with a combat knife in his hand. The blade was traditional, obsidian and bone, sharp as surgical steel and twice as personal. Coda moved with fluid grace, like someone who'd learned knife fighting from masters who treated it as art form. Marcus backed away, calculating distances and angles while Coda circled like a hungry predator. The first cut opened Marcus's forearm, a shallow slice designed to test reflexes and commitment. The second missed his throat by less than an inch as Marcus spun away and grabbed a handful of sand. He threw it in Coda's eyes, rushed forward, while the younger man blinked and cursed and got control of the knife arm. They went down hard, rolling in dust while the crowd pressed closer. This wasn't sport. This was 2 apex predators fighting for territory with everything on the line. Marcus got leverage, twisted until something popped, and Coda's grip loosened. The knife tumbled away, but the younger man wasn't finished. His knee drove toward Marcus's groin with enough force to change anatomical reality. Marcus twisted, took the blow on his thigh, and drove his elbow into Coda's temple hard enough to make his eyes unfocus. They separated, both breathing hard, both bleeding from wounds that would leave permanent reminders. Enough! Ayana stood 10 feet away, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Around her, the entire reservation had gathered to watch judgment being passed in sweat and blood. You've both proven what I already knew. You're warriors." She gestured toward the eastern desert, where mountains looked like broken teeth against dying light. "Now prove you can be something more." She pointed to a trail that led into country that looked like God had run out of patience halfway through creation. 5 days, together. Track the wild horses to their winter grounds. Return with proof you found them. No modern weapons, no GPS, no outside support. Marcus looked at Coda, who was wiping blood from his split lip with the back of his hand. Together? Together. Learn each other's skills. Decide whether you're stronger as allies or enemies. Ayana's voice carried the authority of someone who'd commanded in combat. Because in 72 hours, you're going to need each other. Why? Because Colonel James Morrison and his militia located your trail, Captain. They'll be here in 3 days, armed for war and looking for the evidence you carry about their activities overseas. The desert suddenly felt smaller and infinitely more dangerous. Marcus studied Coda's face, seeing calculation replace hostility as the younger man processed tactical implications. Militia? 43 men, modern weapons, military training. Ayana's expression didn't change. The kind of people who shoot witnesses first and worry about legalities later. Marcus felt the familiar weight of incoming contact settling over him like familiar armor. You knew they were coming. I knew they'd eventually trace you here. I didn't expect it to be this soon. She turned toward Coda. Your trial just became operational training. Coda spat blood into the dust and grinned like a predator who'd caught the scent of wounded prey. Now we find out if your outsider fights as good as he talks. The horse trail led north through country that looked like someone had taken beautiful landscape and beaten it with geological hammers until only the bones remained. Marcus followed Coda through arroyos carved by flash floods and over ridges that offered views of nothing but more emptiness stretching toward horizons that shimmered with heat and broken promises. They moved in tactical silence, communicating through hand signals and the kind of situational awareness that came from too many years in places where inattention had permanent consequences. By the second day, Marcus realized that Coda knew this terrain the way a master surgeon knows anatomy. Every water source, every game trail, every defensive position had been cataloged and memorized through years of moving through landscape that killed the careless. By the third day, Marcus understood that Coda was teaching him, not obviously, not with lectures or explanations, but through pace and route selection, through subtle demonstrations of tracking techniques and survival skills that represented generations of accumulated knowledge. They found the horses on the fourth morning, a herd of 30 animals grazing in a hidden valley that felt like stepping through a door into prehistory. The stallions were magnificent, wild monarchs carrying their freedom like crowns, while the mares moved with their colts in the ancient choreography of survival. How do we prove we found them? Marcus asked. Coda pointed to fresh hoof prints in dried mud near a natural spring. We bring back proof without disturbing the herd. They made plaster casts using materials from Coda's pack, working in silence while the horses grazed 50 yards away, occasionally lifting their heads to study these strange bipedal visitors who somehow didn't smell like predators. That night, camping in a depression that offered concealment and multiple escape routes, Marcus watched Coda build a fire that would be invisible from more than 100 yards away. Why is she doing this? Marcus asked as they shared water and dried meat that definitely hadn't come from any grocery store. Saving our people? Choosing me. Coda stared into flames that danced like tiny spirits. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of watching everything you've ever known slowly disappear. Because she's witnessed genetic extinction in real time, her grandmother told stories about the old days when our people were numerous and strong, before forced relocations, before schools that stole children and tried to murder their heritage. Coda looked up, firelight reflecting in his dark eyes. She's watched our babies die, Marcus. watched healthy women miscarry repeatedly until they stopped trying, watched our young men leave for cities where they might find wives capable of bearing healthy children. Marcus thought about population bottlenecks and evolutionary dead ends, about mathematics that reduced human hope to statistical probabilities. So she went looking for genetic reinforcement. She went looking for warriors who wouldn't abandon their posts when the mission became difficult. Coda's smile held no humor. She found you. The radio call came at dawn, crackling with static and urgency. Coda answered in rapid Navajo, his expression growing harder with each transmitted word. When he ended the communication, Marcus already knew the news wouldn't improve their situation. Morrison's ahead of schedule. His militia hit our outer perimeter 2 hours ago. 15 vehicles, estimated 50 combatants. Military organization, professional equipment. Marcus felt the familiar pre-combat calm settling over him like well-worn armor. Time to contact? 4 hours if they maintain current pace. 6 if they proceed tactically. Distance to reservation? 8 hours at forced march tempo. The mathematics wrote themselves across Marcus's mind in stark clarity. Morrison would reach the reservation before they could provide warning. 50 trained operators against 19 people, including children and elders. It wouldn't be a battle. It would be an extermination, unless someone changed the tactical equation. "Tell me about Colonel Morrison," Coda said as they broke camp with the efficient speed of professionals who'd done this in situations where mistakes meant body bags. Court-martialed for war crimes in Iraq, torture, execution of prisoners, theft of humanitarian supplies. Marcus checked his bootlaces with unconscious thoroughness. Escaped during transport to military prison. Been building a private army ever since. Why does he want you specifically? Because I testified at his court-martial. Because I possess evidence of activities that weren't included in official charges. Marcus shouldered his pack. Because as long as I remain alive, he can never stop running. They moved out at a pace that would have hospitalized civilian hikers, following game trails that offered concealment and speed. Marcus felt his body settling into the rhythm of forced march, while his mind automatically calculated water consumption and calorie expenditure. This was what he'd trained for his entire adult life. The moment when everything else became irrelevant, except mission completion. Behind them, wild horses continued their eternal dance of freedom, unaware that the world was about to change in ways that couldn't be predicted or controlled. Ahead, smoke rose from the reservation like signal fires, calling warriors home to make their final stand. The first gunshots reached them when they were still 4 miles out. Sporadic at first, the measured rhythm of hunters selecting targets. Then rapid staccato of automatic weapons and the deeper thunder of something that sounded like crew-served machine guns. Marcus and Coda ran toward the sound of their world ending. They reached the final ridge as the sun approached its zenith, and Marcus felt ice settle in his chest as he surveyed Morrison's tactical deployment. 15 vehicles in textbook assault formation around the reservation. Fighting positions covering all approaches, overlapping fields of fire designed to catch anything attempting to get close. These weren't weekend warriors playing soldier. These were professionals who'd perverted their training into something that would have made their drill instructors sick with shame. "Count 48 active shooters," Coda whispered, voice carrying the emotionless precision of someone conducting target assessment, plus vehicle crews and command element. Marcus studied the battlefield through binoculars that had witnessed better wars. Morrison had positioned his force to isolate the reservation while maintaining fire superiority from elevated positions. Classic counterinsurgency doctrine applied to civilians whose only crime was geographic inconvenience. Where are our people? Community Center, the large building at center. Coda pointed toward a structure that looked like it had been designed to withstand natural disasters. Most defensible position available. Muzzle flashes sparked from the building's windows, confirming that someone inside was returning fire with hunting rifles and shotguns, civilian weapons against military hardware. It was courageous and desperate and ultimately mathematical. How many people inside? 17, maybe 19. Ayana's coordinating defense. Coda's jaw tightened. Elena, Sarah, and Maria are with her. Marcus understood. The future of the bloodline was trapped in that building, while the past attempted to murder it from outside. What's your tactical assessment? We go down there and die with honor. Coda stated it like weather observation. That's not tactics. That's suicide. You have alternative recommendations? Marcus studied Morrison's deployment with analytical detachment that had kept him breathing through multiple combat tours. The assault force was textbook perfect, mutually supporting positions, clear command structure, overwhelming firepower advantage. It was also completely focused on the wrong objective. Morrison isn't here for your people, Marcus said slowly as tactical possibilities crystallized. He's here for me. Everything else represents collateral damage. Relevance? We change his target priorities. Marcus handed Coda the binoculars and indicated a cluster of vehicles on the perimeter's eastern edge. Command post. Note the antenna arrays. Morrison will be coordinating from there. It's 600 meters across open terrain. We'd be neutralized before covering half the distance. Not if he's chasing us instead of observing us. Marcus was already calculating angles and timing, his mind processing variables like a computer running tactical software. How well do you know the canyon system north of here? Like anatomical knowledge. Well enough to lose 50 men for several hours? Coda's smile could have cut glass. Well enough to lose them permanently. The plan possessed the elegant simplicity that characterizes all desperate operations. Do something so obviously suicidal that the enemy assumes superior intelligence and overreacts accordingly. Marcus worked his way around the perimeter while Coda created diversions on the opposite flank. Nothing dramatic, just enough movement and noise to draw attention while Marcus achieved position. The most difficult part was waiting. Marcus lay in a drainage ditch 70 meters from Morrison's command post, monitoring radio traffic that revealed everything about his former commanding officer's current psychological state. Morrison was frustrated, angry, and beginning to question the intelligence that had brought him here, which meant he was prepared to make tactical errors. Marcus keyed the radio he'd acquired from a perimeter guard whose luck had expired during Coda's diversionary activities. He spoke in the command voice that had once moved mountains and soldiers. Morrison, this is Kane. Radio silence lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. Then a voice Marcus remembered from countless briefings and recurring nightmares came crackling through static. Well, well, the ghost of Christmas past finally announces himself. Release the civilians, Colonel. This concerns only us. It stopped being personal when you destroyed my career, Captain. Morrison's voice carried venom reserved for betrayal among brothers. It became business when you cost me my pension and my freedom. You cost yourself those things when you started executing prisoners. I did what operational requirements demanded. You did what your pathology wanted. There's a difference. Pause. Longer this time. When Morrison spoke again, his voice had acquired the particular coldness Marcus remembered from the worst days overseas. Here's how this concludes, Kane. You emerge from whatever hole you're hiding in and surrender unconditionally. In exchange, I make the deaths quick. Counter proposal. You withdraw your people 500 meters and allow civilian evacuation. You're not positioned to make demands, Captain. Actually, I am. Marcus triggered the radio-controlled explosives that Coda had been emplacing around the perimeter for the past 3 hours. 12 improvised devices constructed from materials salvaged from an abandoned mining operation, positioned to maximize confusion while minimizing casualties. The explosions transformed afternoon into premature fireworks, sending debris and dust clouds into the air, while Morrison's carefully orchestrated perimeter dissolved into chaos. During the confusion, Marcus sprinted toward the command post. He covered the distance in under 40 seconds, vaulting sandbags and rolling to his feet with the Glock he'd liberated from the same unfortunate sentry who'd provided radio access. Morrison stood behind banks of communication equipment, his face displaying rage and disbelief in equal proportions. He was older than Marcus remembered, gray-haired and soft around the middle, but his eyes still held the predatory intelligence that had made him dangerous overseas. "Hello, Colonel." Morrison's hand moved toward his sidearm and froze when Marcus's barrel found the optimal pressure point at the base of his skull. "I wouldn't." "You son of a bitch." "Probably accurate, but I'm a son of a bitch with superior positioning." Marcus keyed the radio with his free hand. "All Morrison units, this is Captain Kane. Your commanding officer is now my prisoner. Withdraw to minimum safe distance, or I begin returning him in small pieces." Response was immediate and predictable. Angry voices demanding proof, threatening retaliation, promising creative deaths. Marcus shot Morrison in the kneecap. The colonel collapsed, clutching his leg while screaming curses that would have impressed drill sergeants. Blood pooled in desert dust as Morrison's radio operators attempted to process auditory evidence. "That was his left knee," Marcus announced to his radio audience. "In 30 seconds, it's his right knee. In 60 seconds, we explore more vital anatomical regions. Withdraw or find replacement leadership." Tactical dynamics shifted with the speed of chemical reactions under pressure. Morrison's people found themselves caught between loyalty and mathematical certainty that their current position had become untenable. Most chose mathematics. Withdrawal was grudging and incomplete, but it created sufficient space for evacuation operations. Marcus observed through borrowed optics as figures emerged from the community center, women carrying children, elders moving with careful precision, young men providing security with hunting rifles. Ayana exited last, rifle sweeping for targets while coordinating movement through hand signals that demonstrated military training and recent practice. She was magnificent in her lethal competence. "You can't maintain this position indefinitely," Morrison said through gritted teeth. Blood loss was making him pale, but his voice retained command authority. "I don't require infinity, just adequate duration." "For what?" Marcus smiled the way apex predators smile when prey finally understands the situation. "For the FBI task force that's been tracking you for 8 months to triangulate your radio transmissions and close the operational net." Morrison's complexion shifted from pale to gray. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Check your 6, Colonel." Helicopters appeared on the horizon like mechanical angels, rotors beating air into submission as they closed distance with mathematical precision. Behind them, a convoy of federal vehicles generated dust clouds that painted the sky with promises of accountability. Morrison attempted to reach his radio and discovered that blood loss had compromised his motor functions. "You orchestrated this." "I orchestrated this." Marcus maintained weapon alignment while the sound of incoming justice grew louder. "The moment I realized you'd located me, I activated contingency plans we'd established 10 months ago. We, FBI counterterrorism, ATF, U.S. Marshals, and several other acronyms with strong opinions about military veterans who become domestic terrorists." Marcus tilted his head as lead helicopters entered landing patterns. "They've been patient, Colonel, waiting for you to commit crimes substantial enough to justify resources they wanted to invest in your capture. Attacking a federal reservation with military weapons qualifies as substantial. Surrender proved anticlimactic, extensive megaphone communication, careful movements with visible hands, methodical sorting of heroes from villains while medical personnel treated wounds that would heal without permanent disability. Marcus found Ayana near the medical station, where Elena was suturing lacerations with the efficient competence of someone who'd learned trauma medicine in places where errors had fatal consequences. "Casualty report?" he asked. "3 wounded. No fatalities." Ayana's voice carried exhaustion that follows adrenaline depletion. Morrison's people weren't shooting to kill. They wanted prisoners. "Dead men can't provide information about my location during the past year." Ayana studied his face with intensity, normally reserved for reading tactical maps under fire. "And now? Now Morrison spends his remaining years in federal facilities where inmates have strong opinions about people who harm children." Marcus watched FBI agents processing evidence with methodical thoroughness. "Your people are safe. For now. For as long as necessary." Ayana moved closer, close enough for him to observe the small scar above her left eyebrow and gold flecks in her dark eyes. "The offer remains valid, Captain." Marcus considered bloodlines and futures, genetic diversity, and children who might grow strong enough to carry their heritage into whatever tomorrow brought. He thought about Coda, who'd earned respect by fighting beside him instead of against him. He thought about Elena, Sarah, and Maria, warriors who needed what he could provide. Most importantly, he thought about Ayana Begay, guardian of her people's future, who'd risked everything on the possibility that one broken soldier might be exactly what her tribe needed to survive. "I accept the mission," he said. Her smile justified every mile he'd walked through desert and every choice that had brought him to this moment. "Good. We begin tonight." "Tonight? Genetic diversity doesn't implement itself, Captain, and the bloodline has waited long enough." Marcus laughed despite everything. Blood, gunpowder, and futures hanging in the balance. "Yes, ma'am." 18 months later, Marcus stood in the same canyon where Ayana had first discovered him, dying among the rocks. But now he wasn't alone. Elena Crowfeather carried his son, 6 months old and already displaying the alertness that ran in both bloodlines. Sarah Walking Bear was pregnant with their daughter, due when desert flowers would bloom in spring abundance. Maria Santos held his 3-month-old daughter, whose eyes already held the intelligence that would serve her well in whatever world she inherited. And Ayana. Ayana stood beside him, her hand resting on the gentle curve where their child grew with each passing day. Boy or girl, it would represent the future she'd fought to secure, the bridge between what her people had been and what they might become. "Any regrets?" she asked. Marcus looked out over the reservation, where children played under watchful eyes of elders, who now had reason for hope, where young men trained in skills that would protect their families, where the bloodline that had survived cavalry charges and government schools would survive whatever came next. Coda approached, carrying tactical gear and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who just completed successful training exercises. He'd become Marcus's second-in-command, teaching traditional skills while learning modern tactics that might prove necessary for future survival. "The new recruits are ready for advanced training," Coda reported. 6 young men, 4 women, all volunteers. Marcus nodded. The reservation's population had grown to 37 people, with more arrivals expected as word spread through networks of displaced veterans and tribal members seeking community. "Any problems?" "Nothing we can't handle." Coda grinned. "They're all warriors, Marcus. They just needed reminding." As the sun set over country that had witnessed the birth and death of nations, Marcus Kane, soldier, father, and guardian of futures yet to be born, finally understood what he'd been fighting for his entire life. The last bloodline had become the first bloodline of something entirely new. And in the distance, an eagle called like a benediction over land that would endure.